Nathan Brooks tapped his fingers against the steering wheel, eyeing the polished trucks lined up in neat rows across his dealership's lot. From the outside, Brooks' trucks gleamed with success, one of the top dealerships in this coastal California city. But a nagging unease had been eating at him lately. Sales were robust, yet customer feedback had grown inconsistent. Some raved about the selection and pricing, while others grumbled about hidden fees and pushy sales tactics. As the owner, Nathan had built this business from nothing, pouring his heart into a dealership people could trust. The idea that something might be wrong under the surface twisted his gut. That's why he sat in a battered Honda Civic instead of his usual Lexus, dressed in faded jeans, a worn flannel, and a baseball cap pulled low. His clean-shaven face now carried a few days' stubble, and he'd traded his luxury watch for a cheap one from a convenience store. The disguise had been meticulously planned. Most of his newer staff had never met him face to face, as he'd been overseeing operations remotely while expanding to other locations. Taking a deep breath, Nathan stepped out, slouching slightly to shed his usual confidence. He'd crafted a persona, Ethan Hayes, a construction worker shopping for a new work truck. As he neared the lot, he spotted Greg Lawson, his recently promoted sales manager, watching from the showroom window with a sharp, predatory gaze. A young salesman, Caleb, bounded over, flashing a polished smile. "Welcome to Brooks's Trucks. I'm Caleb. What brings you in today?" Nathan raised his voice slightly, adopting a working-class tone. "Name's Ethan. Been saving up, looking for something reliable for work." He nodded toward the trucks. "Construction's rough on vehicles, you know." Caleb's eyes gleamed at the prospect of a sale. "We've got just what you need. Our heavy-duty models are perfect for construction. What's your budget?" "About $35,000, Nathan replied, choosing a mid-range figure to test the standard sales process. As Caleb guided him through the lot, Nathan noted every detail, how the salesman pitched the trucks, which features he highlighted, and, crucially, what he omitted. They paused at a silver Chevy Silverado, and Nathan hid a knowing smile. It was a top-selling model, priced just above his stated budget. "This one's a beauty," Caleb said, launching into his spiel. "Strong engine, great towing capacity, and our exclusive Brooks protection package included." Nathan's ears pricked at that. The protection package was meant to be optional, not bundled into the price. He made a mental note, keeping his expression curious but slightly overwhelmed. "Mind if I check under the hood?" he asked, playing the part of a savvy worker. As he inspected the engine, he caught Caleb glancing nervously toward the showroom, where Greg Lawson still watched. Something about that exchange set off alarms in Nathan's mind. After a test drive, Nathan agreed to start the paperwork. Caleb led him into the showroom, where the cool air offered relief from the coastal heat. At Caleb's desk, Nathan noticed the salesman's hands tremble slightly while pulling up forms on the computer. "So, Mr. Hayes," Caleb began, his earlier confidence faltering, "we just need to go through some standard paperwork. The base price is $37,000, with our premium protection package and processing fees." He trailed off, eyes flicking toward Greg's office. Nathan leaned forward, staying in character. "What kind of processing fees are we talking about?" Before Caleb could respond, a commotion at the next desk caught their attention. Nathan tilted his head slightly, careful not to seem too curious, but his pulse quickened. He sensed he was about to witness the very issue he'd come to investigate. The raised voices gave him a chance to pause the paperwork and subtly observe both his transaction and the unfolding scene nearby. He couldn't shake the feeling that he was on the verge of uncovering something critical, something that would explain the troubling customer reviews and the unease that had driven him here. As he sat there, posing as Ethan Hayes, construction worker, Nathan Brooks, the owner, felt the weight of responsibility settle heavily. Whatever he was about to discover would demand action, and he was ready to do whatever it took to protect his business's integrity and his customers' trust. Little did he know, the next few moments would turn everything he thought he knew about his dealership upside down. The tension in the showroom thickened as Paul Mitchell's voice broke with emotion. "This isn't right. My wife and I calculated everything to the last dollar. We've been saving for this." The middle-aged man stood at the adjacent desk, his calloused hands clutching a stack of papers so tightly they began to crumple. Nathan, still posing as Ethan, watched while pretending to review his own forms. Paul's blue uniform shirt bore the logo of a local courier service, and the shadows under his eyes hinted at long hours. A small photo slipped from Paul's papers, a snapshot of 3 young children around a birthday cake. Greg Lawson emerged from his office, his tailored suit and slicked back hair starkly contrasting Paul's modest appearance. The sales manager's face wore a mask of professional concern, but his eyes had a cold edge that made Nathan's instincts flare. "Mr. Mitchell," Greg said smoothly, "I understand your frustration, but these fees are clearly outlined in the fine print." Besides. He produced a document, pointing to tiny text at the bottom. "The market adjustment fee, the mandatory extended warranty, and our premium service package, they're all standard in our financing structure." Paul's face fell. "But your salesman, Ryan, promised the total would be $32,000, not $35,000. Our savings are tied up in the down payment. We can't afford an extra $3,000. Greg's smile didn't waver, but it stayed cold. "I'm afraid Ryan is no longer with us, Mr. Mitchell. Verbal discussions are superseded by the signed agreement." He tapped the contract with a manicured finger. "Perhaps you should have read it more carefully." From his seat, Nathan noticed something that made his blood boil. The document Greg referenced had fresh ink, suggesting fees had been added after the initial agreement. "Please," Paul whispered, "my oldest daughter's starting college soon. My current truck barely runs, and I need something reliable for my delivery route. Without this job, I can't pay her tuition." Greg leaned back, adjusting his cufflinks. "You have 2 options, Mr. Mitchell. Pay the additional fees by the end of the week, or we terminate the sale. The cancellation clause means you'll forfeit your $5,000 deposit." Nathan watched as Paul's face drained of color. The $5,000 was likely his family's entire savings. The trap was brutal. Pay more than you can afford or lose what you've already paid. "This is robbery," Paul said, his voice trembling with anger and desperation. "I'll report this to the owner. I'll go to the Better Business Bureau." Greg's smile turned predatory. "By all means, contact Mr. Brooks. He's busy expanding to other cities. Your complaint might reach his desk eventually, probably around the time your first truck payment is due." He lowered his voice, but Nathan caught every word. "And between us, who do you think they'll believe? A delivery driver who didn't read his contract, or the manager of a multi-million-dollar dealership?" Paul's shoulders slumped, hope fading from his eyes. Nathan recognized that look. It mirrored his own father's decades ago when another dealership had scammed their family. That memory had driven Nathan to start his business with a vow of integrity. Now, witnessing this scene, he fought to maintain his disguise as Ethan Hayes. Every instinct urged him to reveal himself and stop the corruption, but he knew he needed more evidence. If Greg was brazen enough to pull this in the open showroom, how deep did the rot go? How many other families had been hurt? Caleb, handling Nathan's fake purchase, shifted uncomfortably. "Should we continue with your paperwork, Mr. Hayes?" Nathan nodded slowly, mind racing. "Actually, could I get a breakdown of all the fees first? Want to make sure I understand everything." He kept his tone casual, but watched Caleb closely as the salesman prepared the documents. As Paul gathered his crumpled papers and trudged toward the exit, Nathan memorized his appearance. He noted Greg returning to his office, satisfaction radiating from his stride. The dealership's glass windows reflected the coastal sunset, casting long shadows across the showroom. In those shadows, Nathan saw the dark stain spreading through his business, a cancer of greed threatening to destroy everything he'd built. First, he needed proof. He had to uncover the depth of the conspiracy, identify those involved, and determine how many customers had been affected. Only then could he act decisively to restore his dealership's integrity. As he turned back to Caleb's desk, Nathan silently vowed to Paul Mitchell that justice would come. It would take patience and planning, but he would make this right. The question was, how many more customers would suffer before he could gather the evidence he needed? After witnessing Paul Mitchell's devastating encounter, Nathan knew he had to dig deeper. Maintaining his Ethan Hayes persona, he leaned toward Caleb, who was nervously shuffling papers. "Say," Nathan said, keeping his voice low and casual, "those fees the manager mentioned, will they show up on my paperwork too?" He glanced toward Greg's office. "Seemed like a big surprise for that guy." Caleb's Adam's apple bobbed as he swallowed hard. He glanced around before whispering, Look, Mr. Hayes, I shouldn't say this, but he took a shaky breath. Greg has this system. We're supposed to keep initial quotes low, get people attached to the truck, then add mandatory fees at the final paperwork. Nathan raised an eyebrow, encouraging Caleb to continue while discreetly activating the voice recorder on his phone. If we don't follow his process, Caleb went on, we get stuck with dead hours, early mornings, late evenings, times when no one shops, can't earn commission without customers, right? His fingers tapped nervously on the desk. Some of us tried to resist at first, but Greg made examples of them. Like Ryan, the guy who sold to Mr. Mitchell. He was upfront about prices, now he's gone. As if on cue, a young couple entered the showroom. Nathan watched another salesman intercept them, his practiced smile hiding the same predatory tactics. The pattern was eerily consistent. Quick rapport, emotional connection to the vehicle, vague final costs. Mind if I use the restroom? Nathan asked, standing. Need a minute to think. Caleb nodded, relief evident at the brief pause. Nathan wandered the showroom, observing other sales. He noticed patterns. Salespeople rushing customers through paperwork, glossing over fine print, steering attention away from key details. Near the finance office, he overheard two employees chuckling about a recent sale. Guy was so thrilled about the truck, he didn't notice we'd added the premium package. By the time he figured it out, the cooling-off period was over. In the customer lounge, Nathan struck up casual chats with waiting buyers. A young fisherman mentioned being told a market adjustment fee was a new state regulation. An older couple thought they'd gotten a special discount, unaware it merely offset inflated fees. Passing the dealership's wall of awards, best customer service plaques, and community excellence certificates. Nathan felt a bitter sting. They mocked the principles he'd built his business on. At the coffee station, he overheard Greg holding court with newer salespeople, calling it a success seminar, but Nathan recognized it as a masterclass in deception. Customers don't know what they don't know, Greg said, his voice dripping with false wisdom. Our job is to guide them to the right decision. Our decision. Some laughed eagerly, currying favor, while others forced smiles that didn't reach their eyes. Back at Caleb's desk, Nathan pressed further. That protection package you mentioned, is it really necessary? Seems like a lot of extra cost. Caleb's response was telling. Technically, it's optional, he whispered, but Greg reviews all contracts. If someone declines the package, their financing suddenly falls through or their trade-in value drops mysteriously. As they spoke, Nathan spotted recurring fees in the paperwork, market adjustments, mandatory protection packages, premium service plans, all different names for the same goal, maximizing profit through deceit. He watched Greg emerge from his office to salvage a faltering sale using psychological manipulation, empathizing with the customer's concerns, sowing doubt about better deals elsewhere, then presenting the inflated price as the only option. The evidence was clear. This wasn't one rogue manager. Greg had built a culture of deception, using incentives and threats to ensure compliance. Those who followed were rewarded with prime hours and leads. Honest employees were pushed out or relegated to dead shifts. As the day wore on, Nathan cataloged violations, falsified finance applications, manipulated trade-in values, misrepresented warranties, and hidden fees slipped into contracts at the last moment. Each discovery felt like a personal betrayal, but he stayed in character, documenting everything. As the coastal sun dipped low, Caleb slid the preliminary paperwork across the desk. So, Mr. Hayes, should we move forward with your purchase? His eyes held a mix of hope for the commission and guilt for the deception. Nathan glanced at the contract, noting how the initial price had ballooned with mysterious charges, the same trap he'd seen ensnare others. He had enough evidence. The challenge now was confronting Greg without letting him destroy evidence or warn accomplices. As he weighed his next move, Nathan realized the most dangerous part of his investigation lay ahead, the direct confrontation with the architect of this scheme. The weight of his discovery pressed down. His dealership, his dream of honest business, had become predatory under his nose. But before he could fix it, he needed one final piece. Greg Lawson saw Lawson's own admission of guilt. As the showroom began to empty, Nathan knew it was time for the critical moment. He'd timed it carefully, late enough that most staff would be leaving, but not so late his presence would seem odd. "Actually, Caleb," Nathan said, straightening, "before I sign, I'd like to speak with Mr. Lawson about these fees. Mind setting that up?" Caleb's face flickered with concern, but he nodded and headed to Greg's office. Through the glass walls, Nathan watched their exchange, noting Greg's expression shift from irritation to predatory interest at the chance to close another deal. Moments later, Nathan sat across from Greg in the manager's office, where dark wood and leather crafted an air of manufactured authority. Family photos lined the shelves, props in a performance of respectability. "Mr. Hayes," Greg began, his smile calculated, "Caleb says you have concerns about our pricing structure." Nathan played his role, projecting a working man trying to seem sharper than he was. "Yeah, I couldn't help noticing what happened with that other customer. Those fees seemed to come out of nowhere. Am I about to get hit with the same?" Greg leaned back, studying Nathan like a con artist, sizing up his mark. After a moment, he chuckled, a sound devoid of warmth. "You're sharper than most, Mr. Hayes. I like a man who pays attention." "So those fees aren't exactly standard?" Nathan prompted, ensuring his phone was still recording. Greg's voice dropped to a conspiratorial whisper. "This business isn't about selling trucks. It's about selling dreams. People come in thinking they're buying transportation, but they're really buying status, power, the California dream on four wheels." He stood, gazing out at the lot. "Those people out there, they don't know what they want until we tell them. They don't know what they can afford until we stretch their budgets." "Isn't that a bit dishonest?" Nathan asked, masking his simmering anger. Greg turned, a predatory gleam in his eyes. "Dishonest? Please, the owner, Brooks, is too busy raking in profits from his other locations to care about our methods. As long as the numbers climb, he stays away. And trust me, the numbers have never been better." "What about customers who can't afford the extra charges?" "That's the beauty of it," Greg smirked, settling back into his chair. "By the time they realize what's happened, they're emotionally invested. Nobody wants to admit they've been played. Pride is powerful, Mr. Hayes. Most will struggle with payments rather than tell their families they got conned." Nathan's fingers dug into the armrests, but he stayed calm. "And the owner has no idea?" Greg laughed. "Brooks is a fool, stuck in the past, believing in honest business and customer satisfaction. You know what happened to the last guy who tried to report our methods? I buried the complaint so deep in paperwork it's probably still lost." He leaned closer. "Look, I can tell you're smart. That protection package, I can make it disappear for a cash consideration. Think of it as an investment in how things really work here." Nathan's pulse quickened. This was more than he'd hoped for, a direct admission of bribery. "And this works? Nobody catches on?" Greg waved dismissively. "I've built this system, and it's perfect. The owner's too trusting, the customers are too desperate, and the staff's too scared of losing their jobs to talk. It's foolproof." He pulled out a contract. "So, Mr. Hayes, ready to be one of the smart ones who knows how the game's played?" Nathan stared at the contract, his mind racing. He had everything. Explicit admissions of fraud, manipulation, and bribery, all recorded. But he pushed further. "Everyone's in on this? The whole staff?" "The ones who matter are," Greg said, arrogance on full display. "The rest either play along or find themselves working elsewhere. It's survival of the fittest. Darwin would be proud." He leaned in, voice low. "Between us, I've made more in kickbacks this year than Brooks probably makes in legitimate profit. He's so focused on expansion, he doesn't notice his flagship location's a goldmine of hidden fees." As Greg bragged, Nathan felt a cold clarity. This wasn't just about money. It was the systematic destruction of everything he'd built. Every principle, every value had been corrupted by the man before him. The pieces were in place. All that remained was to spring the trap. The exposure had to be public, undeniable, and devastating enough to eradicate Greg's corruption. "Actually, Greg," Nathan said, rising slowly, his voice shedding its affected tone and returning to its natural authority, "I think we need to discuss your employment status." He removed his baseball cap, standing to his full height. Greg's face transformed. Confusion, then recognition, then terror. The color drained from his features. "Mr. Brooks," he stammered, knocking over desk items, "I can explain." "Can you?" Nathan's voice cut like steel. He pressed a button on his phone, and Greg's words filled the office. "The owner's too trusting. The customers are too desperate." "All staff to the showroom floor immediately," Nathan announced over the intercom, his voice echoing. "Emergency meeting, no exceptions." Greg lunged for his computer, likely to delete files, but Nathan was faster. "Touch that, and I'll add destruction of evidence to the charges." Within minutes, the showroom filled with confused employees, the coastal sunset casting long shadows. Many had never seen Nathan in person, and his identity sent shockwaves through the crowd. "For those who don't know me," he said, voice carrying, "I'm Nathan Brooks, the owner. Today I discovered something disturbing about how our business operates." He played excerpts of Greg's admissions, each revelation thickening the air. Some employees looked ashamed, others angry, a few relieved. "Caleb," Nathan called to the young salesman, "tell everyone what you told me about sales hours." Caleb stepped forward, voice shaky but steadying as he described Greg's system of rewards and punishments to enforce compliance. "Furthermore," Nathan continued, "I've documented violations of company policies and state laws." He turned to Greg, now pale and rigid. "Care to explain the kickbacks you've been receiving?" "You can't prove anything," Greg spat. "It's your word against mine." "Actually," Nathan held up his phone, "I have hours of recordings, including your detailed explanation of scamming customers and manipulating contracts, plus a digital trail of altered documents our IT department will uncover." He addressed the staff. "I'm freezing all pending sales. Every contract will be reviewed. If you've participated in these schemes, come forward now with full documentation, and we'll discuss your future. Hide anything, and you'll be terminated without reference, and possibly face legal charges." Silence fell. Then employees began stepping forward, some confessing, others reporting incidents. "As for you, Greg," Nathan said as the former manager edged toward the exit, "you're fired, effective immediately. Security will escort you to clear your personal belongings. Don't bother deleting anything. I'd is backing up your files." As security flanked Greg, his rage erupted. "You're making a mistake, Brooks. This business will tank without me. Those profit margins you love, they'll vanish." "I'd rather earn an honest dollar than steal 100, Nathan replied. Security ensured Greg took only personal items. Nathan turned to the staff. "Starting tomorrow, we fix this. Every overcharged customer will be contacted and compensated. Every fraudulent fee will be refunded. Every dishonest practice ends." He paused, meeting employees' eyes. "Some of you resisted this corruption and were punished. That ends now. Integrity will be rewarded." Slow clapping broke the silence. Everyone turned to see Paul Mitchell at the showroom entrance, having returned to plead for his deposit. "Mr. Mitchell," Nathan said, walking over, "we'll review your contract. You'll get the truck at the original quoted price, with a full refund of extra fees." Paul's eyes welled. "My daughter's tuition." "Will be paid on time," Nathan assured him. "I offer a sincere apology on behalf of Brooks's Trucks. We failed you, and we'll make it right." As the reality sank in, the showroom's atmosphere shifted. Relief replaced fear. Hope replaced resignation. "Tomorrow," Nathan announced, "we rebuild this dealership's reputation. It won't be easy, but we'll restore the trust we've lost, one customer at a time." The dealership's signs glowed against the darkening coastal sky, now standing for a renewed promise. Nathan stood among his employees, ready to begin the hard work of redemption.